Hey, this is Senator Craig Brandt. It's so good to be back with you. I'm sorry we've missed the last few weeks, but this is the Roundhouse Rundown. I have been really busy. I just got back from a trip to Israel, and it wasn't a tourist trip. Uh, you know, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it today, and then we're going to spend some time doing a couple podcasts a week for the next few weeks, really going over what happened on the trip, what I learned on the trip. But uh, let me tell you how it came about. So right after the election, just a couple of days after the election, I get a phone call, and the caller ID on my phone says Consulate General of Panama. Yeah, kind of weird, right? Now, I've only gotten one Consulate General phone call before, and it wasn't from Panama. It was from Canada. And that's because of the work that I do with the Energy Council, where we work with the Consulate Generals in Canada. And so I went ahead and answered it because I'm like, it's kind of strange. I don't think it'll be spam. Well, it wasn't the Consulate General from Panama. It was actually the Consulate General from Israel, which was really cool. You guys know from listening to my podcast in the past that I have this obsession right now with Israel, and I'm going to call it an obsession. Ever since October 7th, after what happened with the massacre in Israel, I have really focused on what's happening in Israel and how we as America can really support and back our greatest ally and truly in the world our only friends. And that's exactly the way they feel. They feel like we are their only friends in the world. And so was asked to come on this trip. It's really just to kind of reestablish some diplomatic relations with New Mexico and Israel, looking at what kind of trade we can do, what kind of things that we can do to help each other, and also to kind of dispel some of these lies that have been out there. The fake news about Israel that's been pushed by our media. Pretty disgusting stuff. And the anti-Semitism that we're seeing in the States is really bad. Worse around the world, but it's bad enough in the United States. And so it was important to me as a believer. I believe that the Bible still says that the nation that stands with Israel, God will bless. And the nation that doesn't stand with Israel, God will curse. And so I believe it is important for us as a nation to continue to stand with God's people, and that is the people of Israel. Now, God's come and given us a new covenant, whereas we as believers, we as Christians, become God's people, but He didn't do away with the old covenant. And I say that because if He did, then the new covenant wouldn't mean anything, right? If God didn't fulfill His covenant with the people of Israel. And I think we've seen through these attacks, as well as throughout the entire history of Israel becoming a nation again and having their own land again there in Jerusalem and in that area in the Middle East, that we see God's protection over Israel several times. And so we'll go through some of that. I won't do a lot on the religious side. One podcast will probably be pretty well focused on the religious side. So if you're interested in that, we can do that. But we didn't really do a lot of that. I had to tell my wife, the only souvenir shopping I got to do was literally I had about 15 minutes while I was on my way to the airplane leaving Israel. We did not have time. We were going from 7 o'clock in the morning till sometimes 11 o'clock at night before we were back in our room, really focusing on work and really focusing on how we can work together. And that was the purpose. How do we forge those trade things with Israel to continue our trade. Now, Israel used to be, most people don't realize this, I didn't know this until after October 7th, Israel used to be our fourth largest trade partner in New Mexico. Now, that was all around Intel. And Intel is still in Rio Rancho, and it's still in Israel. They both have a plant, and so there's still some trade that goes on back and forth there, but they're really interested in some other things. One of the podcasts I'll really focus on and talk about the desalination plant that we got to go to. That company, I got to talk to them. They're very interested in coming to New Mexico and specifically Rio Rancho to look at the possibility of how can they help us with our freshwater issues. Because let's be honest, one thing we have in common with Israel is that we're both in the desert and we both have water issues. But 4 years ago, Israel went from being a water importer to a water exporter. That's right. They now export water to Jordan. That's amazing. They used to have to bring water in because they didn't have enough water because they're in a desert. But now they're exporting water and they're even using their excess water. Amazing, right? Excess water. Can you imagine us in New Mexico saying we have excess water? They're using their excess water to refill the Sea of Galilee. So that's really cool. That company that's worked with the government in Israel to do that wants to come and look at New Mexico and see if they can help us with our water issues. If you don't know, we have a lot of aquifers that are salt aquifers. And so we can come with a desalination plant, fix our brackish water into fresh water so we can actually, maybe we can refill Elephant Butte if we do this right. So the purpose of that trip was to reestablish that relationship with us, to look at other companies. They're big into technology. And so there's some tech things that we're looking at. You know, how can we deal with our trash? That's one of the things they're working on with their trash, and they've come up with some good ideas. We have those same issues. So a lot of the issues they have there, because we both have the same type of topography, we have in New Mexico, and I think that relationship can really help us get past some of the things that we have. And if we look at the history, again, our history with us as a state with Israel is that they were our fourth largest trade partner. They're not even in the top 10 at this point, but as Intel is rebuilding in Rio Rancho and building up and adding new chips, and the Intel plant in Israel is continuing, then that relationship will continue to build. But let's look at other areas. Let's look at areas where we can get them involved, maybe with New Mexico Tech, because they have really focused their economy in Israel around technology. And I think that is one of the ways that New Mexico can partner with them and make us both stronger, and going forward, give us an even tighter relationship and a tighter friendship. So that's kind of what I was doing that's what I was doing over in Israel. I will go over some specifics with you as we talk about different things. The next one I'm going to do is talking about Jerusalem. That was a really neat day. We got to spend about 3 hours in Jerusalem. And so that one, I think you'll really enjoy it. I've got some good video. I've also got some good photos. There'll be photos and videos all the way through this so that you can kind of get a glimpse of what it's like over there. And I will tell you, I'm going to challenge everyone throughout this podcast series that if you're planning a vacation over this next year and you feel comfortable doing it, instead of going on your cruise, this is what I'm doing. And you guys know how much I love to go on cruises. But what I'm doing is, instead of going on a cruise this year, my wife and I are actually going to take a trip to Israel as tourists and go see all the tourist things. We'll stay in the safe areas, and there are a lot of safe areas right now. Most of that war is outside of Israel proper, with the occasional missile, but they've always had that, right? There's always been the occasional missile fired in. That Iron Dome is amazing, by the way, to keep those out. But I think you'll be really excited to hear what happened there. There were a couple of times we thought we might be coming under fire. That was all outgoing, but it got pretty exciting for us, and got a little sketchy a couple of times, but we came through. We're all home safe, and it's good to be back. I look forward to seeing you here in a couple of days as we start